Ladies and gentlemen, it is high noon on Friday, and you have reached the Bass Chaplain Fishing Podcast, where faith and fishing hook up. We are so excited today to have you as our guest. If you hadn't hit that subscribe button, go ahead and hit that and hit the bell notifications, and you will get our podcast as soon as it drops each and every week. I'm so excited today. The angler that I have on my show today is somebody that I can truly say I love. I love this guy. And one of the reasons I love him is because I watched him grow up. I watched him grow up on the Bassmaster Elite Series, watched him fish along the banks and watch his dad. He was just a little kid. But not only do I love him for that, let me tell you, not only is he famous for being like a famous pro son, let me tell you this. Currently, the guy I have on my podcast today is ranked number 2 in the world. Not on the Major League Fishing Trail, not on the Bassmaster Elite Series, in the world, the Bass Fan Rankings, number 2 in the world, Alton Jones Jr. is going to be right here today. And what a year he had and what a career he is having. We are so excited. Stay tuned. Coming up next on the Bass Chaplain Fishing Podcast, where faith and fishing hook up. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Bass Chaplain Fishing Podcast, where faith and fishing hook up. I have as my guest today somebody that I watched grow up, but currently, as the introduction just said, he's not ranked number 14 in the world. He's not ranked number 14 or in Major League Fishing. Number 2 in the world, Alton Jones Jr., man. Golly, dude, we are so happy that you're here today, man. Welcome.
Oh man, thanks for having me. I look at those rankings and then the way I feel on the inside, there's got to be something wrong with it because I definitely don't feel like the number 2 ranked angler in the world. But it's been a fun ride.
Man, no, Jay Kumar came up with that system, so you know it's dead on, man. It's dead on accurate, and so that's the deal. And just to move up to number 1, all you got to do is knock off Jacob Wheeler. It's a piece of cake, man.
That's it, man.
And that's it. Wheeler's going down, baby.
I told you, I talked to him quite a bit. He broke his toe over New Year's. And I said, well, you going to take a medical year or what? But no, of course not. And I said, maybe there's a shot at that number 1 ranking, but it looks like we're going to have to get it the old fashioned way.
Yeah. We don't want to wish Wheeler any ill will at all, but no. How exciting is that though? That is so cool. I watched you, the biggest memory I have is, Kentucky Lake. We were at Kentucky Lake in Paris, Tennessee. And, you were walking around the little area, the marina area where we blasted off, as a kid, and you were just smoking them right there in front of everybody. Nobody could fish in there, and you were out there doing that. I was like, good night, man. That was wild. It just seems like yesterday that you were just running around out there, with your mom and dad, running around the campgrounds, running around all the places, and man, what a journey. Wow. That's pretty cool.
It's gone by so fast, and I still feel like that kid walking around the marina, but then I look around and all of a sudden my back's starting to ache a little more, and the days are going by faster, and I've got a kid of my own now. So,
man, wow! Congratulations on that. That's the most life-changing thing outside of coming to Christ that you could ever experience in your life. I remember when my son was born. He came out purple. I was like, we gave birth to Barney. Whoa, it was wild. But it was definitely the most life-changing moment. I remember looking up at God going, God, how in the world could you love me so much that you'd send, because I don't even know this kid, and I'll take a bullet for him right now. I mean, I didn't know I could love somebody so much. And so,
it is an incredible gift that, words really can't describe it. You're coached your whole life on, that's going to change your life forever. And honestly, I hated hearing that. Yeah, sure will. Yeah, whatever. But man, it just, until you've done it, you just can't, words can't express how much you're going to love that thing, for one. Yeah. You never thought you could love anything in the world that much. And then 2, how much your priorities just go completely 360, 180 degrees, just flip them upside down.
Yeah, it does. It definitely does. That's wild. Well, man, tell us about growing up in the fishing world. I just want to hear about your journey, your fishing journey. I want to hear about, I know we know about your dad. We know, And your dad, I've said your dad's name more than any other angler's name that I've ever said, just because he was an integral part of kind of getting me where I am. And so but talk about that fishing journey, about your dad's, obviously he's a classic winner, successful pro, to say the least. And you grew up in that. Talk about that. Talk
Yeah.
about how you got to be a professional fisherman on your own. So.
Right. Yeah. So, growing up, I had a very different upbringing. Like you said, with my father, I was homeschooled, traveled the country. So from the time I was 6 till when I was 18, graduating high school. And with that, my mom, being an absolute saint, was homeschooling me at night from a time when I was about 9 or 10 years old. That's kind of when I became old enough, to start practicing with my dad. So back in the day, they could have someone practice with them. And they were fishing bass and FLW at that time. So 20-ish events a year, a lot of time on the water. Bass, you had 3 days of practice for those events. FLW, you had unlimited practice. So some of these events were practicing for 7 days, 10 days, 2 weeks. And when I became old enough to where I could weather the conditions, about 10 years old, you give me a nice rain suit, a bunch of layers of clothes, you could take me out with my dad and some gloves, and it was snowing. And that's when I really started to fish a ton. I always loved fishing, grew up fishing, pond fishing or just crappie fishing with my dad. But looking back, I don't know exactly what I was thinking, because if you've ever practiced with my dad, he cuts your hooks off like 90% of the time. So here I am, 10, 12, even 16 years old, flipping a jig without a hook down a bank when it's 30 degrees out. No. Oh yeah, Dad, I got a bite. Okay. That was my fishing. Oh, there's one. I shake him off as he swims off.
Oh man.
But I think that really kind of prepared me and gave me a lot of discipline for the future, even though that's not really what I was thinking. And what's crazy, even though I loved bass fishing so much as a kid, loved spending time in the outdoors with my father is really what it was. It never really clicked like, hey, I want to be a professional bass fisherman, until I was about 14, 15 years old. I started fishing some tournaments of my own. I had a buddy named David Ridley. He was probably 15 years older than I was at the time, but he was one of the guys. He was a mentor to me, good Christian fella, and my parents would just kind of let me go fishing with him across the state of Texas. So I kind of got my taste of tournament competition, be it a Wednesday night jackpotter, Bass Champs, Texas Team Trail, and that's when I absolutely fell head over heels in love with the sport of bass fishing. I always loved to fish, but getting that taste of competition and honestly a taste of a little bit of success was just something like, wow, you know what, maybe I could do this the rest of my life, rather than, because it became pretty clear to me, like I had aspirations of, I wanted to be a professional baseball player. Well, this probably wasn't going to work out, let's just be honest. Everything you can imagine. I wanted to be a baseball player, football player, snow skier, you name it. And finally, I got to take all the like competitive dream and drive and put it towards one thing, and that was bass fishing. And in 2000, I believe it was 2008. It was the year my dad won the Classic.
Right. Yep, that's it.
I turned 16, and I was able to fish as a co-angler on the Bassmaster Elite Series. So then again, just another level of that not only competitive drive for myself, but I got to see the tournament side of the professional fishing industry. So I always practiced with my dad, so I got to see the preparation side.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, you're putting me in the boat with Rick Clunn, Todd Faircloth, Terry Scroggins, all these guys, and I got to see the actual competition day. And so that just kind of furthered my love. And that's kind of just the backstory on how I became to love bass fishing. Then whenever I actually turned 16, my dad began to keep his old boat 1 year longer, which allowed me to have a boat to fish out of back home as long as I was acting right and behaving right. And
Right.
he, again, with my buddy David Ridley, we traveled the state of Texas fishing Bass Champs Texas Team
Yeah.
Trail. Fast forward, went to college, Baylor University, 2010 to 2014. Didn't have much of a fishing team there at the time, but I still continued to fish Bass Champs Texas Team Trail and had some success at that point, and was able to save up a little bit of money, and that kind of funded my start into the Bassmaster Opens.
Mm. Yeah.
And
Now,
so
now
just
you and David did pretty well together,
yeah,
didn't you?
yeah.
I remember seeing just Facebook pictures and stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, we won a tournament on Lake Falcon, another one on Lake Amistad back in their heyday when they were
Yeah.
phenomenal bodies of water. And you know, really the cool thing about that is I wasn't just fishing around my house. You know, I was Lake Falcon almost are 5-6 hours from my house. Rayburn and Toledo Bend are 3-4 hours the other direction. I'm fishing up in the DFW area. So one thing that David allowed me to do, well, he just being such a rock solid guy, like it gave my parents that comfort. Hey, yeah, you're 16 years old. I couldn't imagine doing that with our son now. And just being like, yeah, just go for a week, go to Mexico, basically.
Yeah.
And but you know, having someone in their 30s who's just a trustworthy, good dude, that they knew was going to mentor me and shepherd me in all the right ways as I'm kind of learning my way through the fishing stage, really helped out a lot. You know, he helped. I can remember just lots of long talks on the road and just different things. And looking back now, I'm just going fishing. But you know, the way he was just really intentional with me, was really important in my faith and me growing up.
Man, that's a big deal. It's a big deal that, we talk about evangelism and me as being an evangelist, but and then a lot of people talk about discipleship. They talk about, and usually they either talk about one or the other, but it's got to be both. It's got to be in having a mentor, having somebody, and I want to encourage all the mentors out there that man, David invested in you, and now look, where you are. And that's got to be rewarding for him when he looks, and he goes, man, wow. He goes, all those times and doing that is so very important. Let's transition in. Tell me about how you came to faith in Christ. And what is you grew up in a Christian home, and so, how did that happen for you?
Yeah, so grew up in a Christian home. My dad is very, very good at sharing his faith. He's always used fishing as a platform in my lifetime. You know, he has a testimony before I came around, where that wasn't the case. But the family in the home I've always known has been very faith forward, very open about their faith. I first put my trust in Jesus. I was 8 years old, very young, and I was old enough to understand that I needed to do it, and I did it. I became baptized, and it was something I initiated. I asked my parents about, wanted to do, but the more I've grown up, being totally honest, like I think partially growing up in a Christian household can I don't know if it makes you put you on coast a little bit,
Yeah.
because there's a big part of the world that I'd never been exposed to. I'd never been really tempted by, you fast forward to my college years, weren't the brightest years of my life, from a faith aspect. There was a lot of falter, a lot of learning, and fast forward, getting out of college was probably the best thing that could ever happen to me. And I really kind of had to reevaluate and look at my life and be like, where do I stand? Like, I made this promise when I was just a kid, and I basically had to re-give my life to Christ. Looking at, it was probably 2015. My wife and I were dating at the time, and really just looking at the direction of my life and seeing where I'd been, what my life had become, and where I wanted it to go, and had to rededicate my life to Christ. It was just kind of a moment of repentance, you
Right.
know,
Yeah.
and it hasn't been perfect since then. So it's kind of, it's a two-part answer when I gave my life to Christ.
Right.
There was part A and part B.
Yeah.
For me, you know, there was kind of my childhood, and then there was the adult time that had happened, and you know, ever since then it's been far from perfect. But I'll tell you, it, it's been the last couple years of my life have been really important in that walk with Christ. Like it is weird kind of becoming an adult and looking at my faith and feeling like an infant, you know?
Mm.
And
Yeah.
so it was kind of almost embarrassing, you know, because you look at your father and the stage that you had been given, or the upbringing you had been given, and then you look at like what you've done with it, and it is a little embarrassing. So kind of swallowing that pill, having the accountability of a close group of community around you to just basically open up and be like, hey, I'm not where I need to be. Help me get there.
Yeah. Man, that's so awesome that you
Um,
sit on, so many different things. And I even said it first. And for those of you that are listening out here today, I said you grew up in a Christian home. That doesn't mean that Alton Jr. grew up in a Christian orphanage. He was just he was raised by Christians. And a lot of times as Christians, I say that a Christian home, and people go, what are you talking about? You grew up in the Christian home, you were an orphanage or something. But, you're obviously live in a family. I've met, your grandfather and you just grew up, in a faith-based household. But our dad's faith and our granddad's faith and our mom's faith doesn't ever translate over to our faith. We have to all come to faith. And I think we had joined Neon recently, and he was talking about that too. He was talking about how he gave his life to Christ, and then he kind of grew cold and kind of, and had to come back. And that's a big encouragement to guys that are listening, that you may have a relationship with Christ, but you've let your relationship kind of falter off. You hadn't put it at the forefront of your life, and that's important. That the people that we look up to, and I appreciate you saying that, say that I struggle too. I struggle every single day, and the people think, Christians. I run into it with the Bassmaster Elite Series a lot. They kind of post you up there and just kind of say, well, he's kind of a goody goody, type of deal. And I'm like saying, man, if you knew what I've done and you knew what I think about and you know what I do, you would think, man, you've got no business out there whatsoever.
yeah,
But that is where the grace of God comes in, and God is
yeah,
patient with us. We have a sovereign God that is, even though we make our plans, the Bible says He orders our steps, and even when we think we've messed it up totally,
yeah,
God can somehow bring it back around,
yeah.
to good. So that's really cool, man. I appreciate your faith. I
Mhm.
appreciate your testimony out there. Let's talk about your fishing strengths now.
Right.
If you had to pick one technique, I think I know the answer to this, but I want you to tell our viewers what is your go-to deal if you got a tournament and you say, okay, you can pick anything you want to do at this tournament, boom, and it's going to work. What would you go to?
Man, it's gonna have to be sight fishing, like an overall strength of mine. I've got a couple of them, but sight fishing, spawn fishing. If anybody knows my dad, that's it as well. And
Yeah.
you could say that the apple didn't fall far from the tree on that. Now I'd say he's better than me at it. He still teaches me. Like it's one of the few things where I'm like, if I ever spend the day in the boat with him sight fishing, I'm like, golly, how do I still have this far to go? That's one of the things. I'd say it's one of the few things that he can still just absolutely thump me when it
Mm.
comes to competition. But sight fishing, bed fishing, anywhere around those stages of bass spawning is just something I love.
Wow. I've been in the boat with him watching. Well, really how I got to be the chaplain was ESPN, they announced the classic was going to be at Hartwell, and I dove
Mhm.
over my couch and called up ESPN, and it just so had me and a buddy of mine, Keith Satterfield. Actually, his wife called. I need to get that story straight because his wife called for us, but I was so jacked up, and we and we got paired 1 and 2. He was number 1 on the list, and I was number 2 on the list. And so we don't even know who we're going to be with. And we go up, and they said the boats are all in order right there, and number 1's right there, number 2 right there. Well, I go up, and the boat says Alton Jones, and I'm like, well, wow, God's got a sense of humor. So that's
Yeah.
and so that's kind of how it happens. But I've watched him, and he has shared some things with me that I'm not going to share anybody. I'm not ever going to tell anybody.
Well,
I'm
you
just going
might.
to use them.
We'll talk after this podcast.
Yeah, we'll have to do that. So that's really a great deal. Now you had a really good year last year. A really good year. Obviously, you're ranked number 2 in the world. Tell us about your 23 year and what all went on. I believe I can't remember the name of the lake that you won on. Caney,
Caney. It was multiple lakes. It was Caney and Bussy Break.
Caney and Bussy Break. Yeah,
Yeah.
tell us about that one. Tell us about what happened there.
Yeah. So a little bit of I'll preface this before started off my year. We had Cherokee Douglas. No, actually, we had a Kissimmee chain. Barely got a check. Got a check there. Just kind of a mid-pack check finish. Cherokee Douglas. Barely missed a check there, and so while it's not a bad start. 2 tournaments in, I'm like, well, Angler of the Year's, it's out of the question. It's over. But we can just go fishing now. Fast forward to Red Crest, which is the next event. I actually finished second in that one.
Yeah, that was at Norman.
Yeah, Lake
Right?
Norman
Yeah,
too.
Lake Norman.
Brian
Yeah.
Thrift won that one.
Yeah.
I mean, what can you do there?
Yeah.
If you're gonna lose, you might as well lose to one of the best on its
right.
own pond. So, and then I believe the next tournament was Murray. Finished 11th there, so kind of Red Crest, then Murray really kind of started to get the ball rolling, and we head to Bussy Break. But between Murray and Bussy Break, my wife and I, we had our first child. We had Jet.
Yeah.
And so got to go through the whole, and we had that's not a big break I'm talking about. So I get home from Murray the very next day. She induces, we have the baby. 6 days later, I hit the road again.
Wow.
So I'm leaving. Jet's 6 days old. I can tell you, like, I've never pushed that late leaving for a tournament. I rolled up to Bussy Break about 1 a.m. the night before practice started. Like, just didn't my mind was here, tournaments here.
Yeah.
But and I think part of going into that event, I was like, I either want to win this thing or I want to finish last because I want to get home as quick as possible. I said the worst thing that could happen is for me to drag this thing out and then me finish 10th. Just be gone as many days as possible and then finish 10th. So I went through that event and had a fairly kind of okay practice, nothing great. So the tournament started out on Caney, which happened to be kind of a late spawn event, which is something that developed as the week went on when the weather got better, or an offshore event. But then I spent 1 half day of practice on Bussy Break. And when I spent that half day of practice, I found a shad spawn, catching big fish. That day I was flipping a white bellows gill, heavy line. I felt really good. I kind of had a good idea, the other guys that had practiced there, how many bites they had gotten. I saw how many bites I had gotten. And I told Kelsey, I said, I have no idea how I'm going to get to Bussy Break, but if I do, I think I've got a good chance. Fast forward, and the spawn bite really, really developed well for me. Caught all my fish, basically sight fishing at Caney, and was able to make the championship round. And we started that final day on Bussy Break. Weights are zeroed. 10 of us out there fishing for $100,000 and $100,000 big bass. And I caught a couple fish, and I think I was actually leading around the end of the first period. I caught them all flipping, but we had a big front blow through, and it got real windy. And so I had 2 more areas, and I had a group of trees that needed to be flipped, and then I had a long straight stretch of cypress trees that I had fished in practice, caught a couple big ones on. And I pull up to it, and it's a small lake, but the waves are crashing in. I flip about 6 trees, and it just doesn't feel right. And I'm like, I'm gonna pick up a spinnerbait. And it was just like, I mean, if I've ever had a light go off, it was the most incredible bite I think I've ever been on. You know, I was throwing a half ounce. It was a booyah covert spinnerbait, and I was putting a bellow shad on the back of it to give it just a bunch of bulk. The fish were really high in the water column because they're feeding on shad on a shad spawn, and I was basically just slow rolling it, but keeping it really high in the water column with that big bulky trailer. And I don't remember. I probably caught 40 fish that day
Wow.
on that line of trees, and I mean, for scale, I mean, there was a lot of guys. Most guys were catching 3 to 5 fish in a day, and so to catch 40 bass on that body of water was, I mean,
Wow.
I was dreading being pinched and waking up, you know, or hearing my alarm go off, because it was one of those days. Like, I've had plenty of dreams where I'll be driving to the expo, or you know, the weigh-in stage of the classic with the winning fish in the live well, and I wake up, you know, but I was just
Yeah.
hoping that didn't happen,
Yeah.
and luckily it didn't.
You know, the emotions of Major League Fishing is just that would tear me out of the frame. I mean, that would be the one thing that would just, you know, when somebody else, when you've got a guy telling you, hey, yeah, Brian Thrift just caught an 8 pounder, and you're just going, what is, I mean, I can't imagine. I put intense pressure on myself when I don't know what everybody
Yeah.
else is doing.
Yeah.
But that's got to be that's got to be. But I guess on that day, that was a pretty good feeling. You know.
Yeah, you know, that was a bit of a stress-free day. You know, I early in the second period, I jumped out to a 30 plus pound lead, and put it in perspective, the guy that finished second had 29 pounds. I think I had 89, and so with that, you know, you don't get many opportunities where you just kind of know it's in hand. And so I really just got to enjoy that moment. You know, when I won at Lake Fork the year prior, I mean, I was elevated heart rate, winning by ounces to the last second. Lost some years on my life, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
from
I can
stress.
imagine. Yeah.
You know, one of the things, though, you talk about the stress and anxiety of the format or of any fishing. And you know, you look at my Latin, I had 2 events in a row there, Red Crest and in that event. One of them at Red Crest, you know, I'm wanting to get home. You know, Kelsey's near the end of her pregnancy. I'm wondering, am I going to be in North Carolina when my son's born? Not that I didn't care about the event, because obviously winning Red Crest would be a dream come true.
Right.
I was focused as hard as I could be, but it also put perspective of like, you know what, this is not the most important thing in my life right now, you know?
Yeah.
And so I think adding that perspective in um, helps the stress and anxiety, and also tasting some success helps that. You know, one thing I always dreamed of winning a Bassmaster Open, Bassmaster Elite Series, BPT, and here I am. I can walk right out that door, and I've got a couple of those trophies now, and they're just trophies. I walk
Mm.
past that BPT trophy every day. It doesn't change who I am. It doesn't change what I think of myself. It does, you know, and it just like, while it's something we long for, it's something we push for and drive for, it's not what defines me, you know?
Mm.
And
That's
so
good.
having your priorities in order, I do think helps the stress of on the water, uh, you know, just the stress and anxiety of knowing that, like, you know what, this day, me finishing second or first doesn't define me. It doesn't define my family. It's not what's the most important thing, you know. Now,
Yeah.
obviously, fishing is how I feed my family, so I want to win, and
Right.
I'm a competitive person. I want to win. I don't ever want that to be understated. Um, but I'm going to control what I'm going to control. I'm going to trust the Lord. And at the end of the day, those trophies are going to go somewhere. I'm going to go, you know, my earthly body is going to go in a box 6 feet underground, and I'm going to go somewhere else.
Man, I can't think of a better way to end a podcast. I was so enamored with your whole story that I didn't even stop to take breaks for our deal. So we're gonna have to put that in. But man, I appreciate you being here with me today. That is awesome. Now listen, if people want to follow you, and keep up with you. I mean, I keep up with you on Instagram. I keep up with you on just about every platform that
Yeah.
you've got. Tell us how to follow Alton Jones Jr.
Yeah, you can follow me on Instagram or Facebook at Alton Junior Fishing. The biggest and best way if you want to support and follow me is on YouTube at AJ Fishing. I've got a videographer that travels the country with me. We put out a lot of content on the Trimmed Up series, and so we start here at Toledo Bend in a couple weeks, and we'll be pumping out a lot of videos.
Yeah.
So if you want to see a true in my life, outside of just a picture or a short clip, check me out on YouTube.
Yeah, yeah. I've been trying to get your buddy Tyler Anderson over on the podcast. I think he's about to have a child. His wife's about to have a child,
Yeah,
or maybe
they're
already has. I mean, I know they were
tomorrow.
tomorrow.
Yeah,
Wow,
yeah.
wow.
So
Good deal. Yeah, that's a good deal. So, cool deal. Well, man, we appreciate you being here. And folks, let me tell you, if you're looking for somebody in your life and you want your kids to follow somebody, you need to check out Alton Jones Jr. We're just going to say blessings to you. And I want to thank everybody for tuning in today. This is the Bass Chaplain Fishing Podcast, where faith and fishing hook up.